Welcome to At Work in America, sponsored by Paychex. At Work in America digs in behind the headlines and trends to the stories of real people making a difference in the world of work. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Bowes and Trish Steed.
Welcome to the At Work in America podcast. My name's Steve Bowes. I'm with Trish Steed. Trish, what's happening?
I am just trying to get through the week. How about you?
I think so. I think the same. We're recording this midweek as we speak.
Oh,
I'm not sure exactly when it's running, but yeah, so we're
yeah.
just right smack dab in the middle of a
Oh my
work week. And I would say this, I thought this morning, summertime, August, which it still is,
God.
supposed to be a little slower, supposed to be calm. And I feel like
No,
we're going full bore these last couple of weeks, especially. Had a little bit of downtime in July, but August has been crazy.
I agree, but it's good crazy, right? Like we love when we're having more to do. But yeah, I was hoping I will say, I'm taking Friday off. I'm gonna do my first summer Friday this summer.
Good.
And
Summer's
no, I'm
almost over.
taking I know it's almost over. No, I am going to go see my son. University of Utah just started up this past Monday. So I'm going to go out there for the weekend and just make sure he's all settled in for his junior year of college. So, yeah.
This is maybe a topic for, our old work break shows that we used to do, but I was reading something over the weekend,
Mhm.
which reminded me of something you just said, which was I've seen this new kind of helicopter parenting thing where some parents are moving their children into, say, like the freshman dorm kind of
Right.
situation, the classic dorm with
Sure.
two roommates, one, single bed on either side of the room, but they're arriving to the move-in, and the other roommate's not there yet, and maybe he's not coming for
Okay.
a day or two. And the parents, I've only seen this with moms, so it's probably
Oh
maybe more
no.
of a mom thing. The moms are staying over the night in
No.
the dorm room with their freshman child, Trish, in the college dorm room as after they've moved him in. Is that sort of insane? I think I got dropped off at college and kicked on the way out the car when I got taken to college.
Yeah, I think it was like here's a 50 or something, and we'll see you in 3 months, 4 months. No, you know what? That's interesting because I have not heard that specific story, but what I will say is that I have one student at University of Nebraska, one at University of Utah. So I'm on both of like the parents' boards, for out of state kids or adults, right? And it's funny because you can always see like the first month or two is just bombarded with all of the new freshman parents joining in, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I need to do this, this, and this for my kid. I need to make sure that every single thing is perfect for little junior or whatever." And I just want to be the meanest person ever and be like, "Stop it. Go home and stop it. Cry your eyes out if you need to, but stop it." Like they're trying to navigate like the most recent one, I had to mute it. It was like, my son's RA is not, around enough and checking on him enough. And we've been moved in now
Mm,
for a whole day. And then it was like, what activities does the school have planned for us as a family to go through? It's like, no, your now young adult is going to college. Let them go.
yeah,
Like, yeah,
it's
kiss and
quite
hug.
something.
Here's some cash. Goodbye, right?
Yeah, it's something we could go on about that for ages, but good. Well, that sounds good. Take a little bit of a break. I'm
Yeah.
excited, Trish, for today's show, of course. And by the way, we've been killing it lately. The last couple of shows that we've
Mhm.
recorded and posted with the Volunteers of America, Colorado,
Oh,
with Dave
so good.
Shunk talking about faith-based leadership, servant leadership was
Mhm.
fantastic. And the show we just did with Rhett and Austin from Shoulder, that's Shoulder
Oh
with
yeah.
No You. It's a new and innovative kind of approach to mental health,
Hmm.
and can be offered as an employer-sponsored benefit as well. And just fascinating conversation with Rhett and Austin. And I'd encourage folks to check it out. And to me, these last couple of shows, especially Trish, are like exactly what we wanted to have happen right when we
Yes.
rebranded or relaunched this show or launched this At Work in America show a few years ago. So I do
Yeah,
encourage folks to check those out. I'm wearing the Paychex hat today, Trish. If you're watching
you
this on
are.
YouTube, you can see that. Let's thank our friends at Paychex. They are one of the leading providers of HR, payroll, retirement, and insurance solutions for businesses of all sizes. If you ever felt like you're drowning in paperwork or repetitive tasks, you're probably like all your HR colleagues. But there's time, Trish, to kind of move ahead and change your game using AI, of course. And Paychex has offered this great webinar featuring Beaumont Vance, who's Paychex Senior Vice President of Data Analytics and AI, to help you discover how leaders are using AI to help streamline HR tasks and supercharge their efficiencies. So you can watch this on-demand webinar, Trish. Go to
Mhm.
paychex.com/AWIA, paychex.com/AWIA, and watch the webinar today and learn how to help transform your HR processes powered by AI. And thanks to our friends at Paychex, of course, for all their support.
Absolutely.
All right, Trish, enough with the beginning. Let's get to the show. We're doing like a modified version of Workplace Hall of Fame today.
We are.
It's kind of Workplace Netflix documentary Hall of Fame, I guess.
I think that's fair. I think doing it on a whole show and sort of like lumping it in instead of a movie, it's more hours that we put into this one, but it was very workplace related. Let's just say that.
Yes, today we are talking about the Netflix documentary called America's Sweethearts, the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders. It's a 7-part documentary on Netflix chronicling essentially a season, right? A football
A
season
season.
in the life of the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders organization, its management, its team members, its comings and its comings and goings and trials and tribulations. And
Right.
I must tell you, at the beginning of this, I was like, I do not care about this. And the only reason I was interested in it is because I had famously read over the years, Trish, and maybe you had as well, of
Mhm.
professional sports teams, football teams, but other sports teams as well, famously underpaying their cheerleaders to the point
Yes.
where they barely make any money at all or very, very low salaries. And so I knew there was a workplace angle even coming into this before I began to watch the series. Trish, what did you know about the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders and anything about this story before you started watching the documentary?
Like you, very little. So, and honestly, when that first came out on Netflix, because it's been out a few months, I had no interest in watching this because it just didn't sound appealing to me. But the more you and I talked about kind of the workplace implications, it seemed interesting, and I'm glad we watched it. They've had another show that's been on even before this one for many years, kind of chronicling the same things where you're going through mainly the tryout process. This is a 10-week boot camp, if you will, training boot camp that these potential cheerleaders go through. So I absolutely wanted to learn more about, just what they do go through, right? Because it's not just like show up, try out, and oh, you've made it. This is like a really dedicated group of women athletes because, again, it's not just doing dance, right? A good dancer won't get you in. You have to have more than that. So, but other than that, I think just growing up, I had obviously heard of the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders. Back when I was young, they were just kind of starting into calendars and posters, right? So boys at school would, of course, have some of those things or be talking about those things. But yeah, I mean, I think as a young girl, I thought, wow, that would be really glamorous to look like these women and, you know, be a cheerleader. That, of course, it's like being a prin like I also wanted to be a princess, right? So I don't know. To me, it was a little bit unrealistic.
Yeah, yeah, and this documentary, Trish, is essentially the entire documentary is really the workplace, or right, and
Mhm.
it's there are some
Yeah,
divergences throughout the 7 episodes where we get into some of the folks, the cheerleaders, and some of the management's kind of personal lives a little bit, but
a
it's
little bit.
mostly about the job, right? The
Yes.
organization, the process, the job, the people doing the job, and 95% of probably the documentary is filmed inside, quote unquote, a workplace, right? The locker
Mhm.
room, the practice facilities, the stadium for the games. So I think maybe we'll start, Trish, with how the documentary sort of starts, right? And what you alluded to was like the recruitment process, how it
Mhm.
works, and what kind of lessons or just boy, that's interesting. Like takeaways that to the broader workplace, even that you pulled out, or did you pull out any from that process of actually selecting the team?
Yeah, just to start off, I think I'll say there are a lot of positives for these women as they go through. Some of the things I wrote down was, it's almost a sisterhood. They all have similar goals in terms of their passion for dance or performing or, for being athletes. Many are athletes in their own right in other sports as well. So they kind of bring that attitude. I thought that was really a positive thing about who comes to these tryouts. But really, I mean, just from a pure audition standpoint, it seemed to me, right or wrong, that they get so many, hundreds or even thousands of women each year who are interested that by the point we're seeing the girls coming in, they've already been through several layers of kind of whittling through that, right? They submit online auditions and so forth. So by the time you're actually invited to come in person, you've been vetted by a number of people, which is a little bit different, I think, than I thought it was. That in that regard, it was a little more like a regular job interview could be, for example, using maybe, a submitted video or video interviewing software, and then kind of then determining, right, who comes into your workplace to actually perform an interview.
Yeah.
I don't know. What were you thinking as you were watching that initial part of the process?
It was similar enough to other types of recruitment that we see, right, with the sort of
Mhm.
online submissions and the vetting and like any other hyper competitive kinds of positions that are out there. There's a lot of applicants for very
Mhm.
few roles. I think the one or two things that really stand out to me, unlike sort of quote unquote normal jobs,
Right?
in this job, everyone has to reapply for their position every year in terms of the actual cheerleaders
Yes.
themselves, right? So we learn in the documentary they select 36 cheerleaders for the final team.
Hmm.
If any of those 36 cheerleaders want to be on the team again the following season, they must start the audition process all over again and
Hmm.
re-audition, essentially reapply for their job in order to try to keep it. Now,
Right.
certainly people who are returning to the team do have some advantages over the new entrants to the team and to the new rookies. They've got certainly more experience. They've built up some, connections with the leadership. They've just know what to expect, so they're not surprised by anything in the process, et cetera, et cetera. So they do have some advantages when it comes to reapplying and completing the process. But that is unusual, Trish, because I mean, maybe it's more of a sports thing or a performing arts
Mhm.
thing. In most of our normal jobs that we've had in our lives, we're not always having to reapply for our jobs, right? And having
Yeah,
to
that would be really
Right,
stressful,
and
I
having to
would think.
prove that you should still be working there. Now, certainly, performance-oriented kind of cultures, you're having to
Yeah,
prove yourself fairly regularly, but the
sure.
formal reapplication process for your job is quite unusual. And I thought a touch surprising, especially for, folks who'd been on the team, 3, 4, and maybe even 5 years,
Hmm.
that they'd have to start all over from scratch, right? Again, with
Right.
some of that personal kind of um, that personal connections, et cetera, and expertise built up, but still thought
Yeah.
that was a little bit unusual.
I think I was in my mind trying to compare it to other seasonal types of work because this really is, we think about it like, oh, they're maybe not paid enough, for example. And I was absolutely in that camp. I might still be a tiny bit in there, but when you really think about it, this is not a 365 days a year job. This is something that is considered seasonal.
Mhm.
So, in that regard, if you were applying for maybe to be Christmas help or something like that, right, during a holiday season, you might then, if you wanted to work at that store the next year, you would probably have to reapply, I would imagine. Now, again, like you said, you might have some advantages. You might know the leaders, you might have some other experiences that help you get those jobs. But I think, each year I did go back and watch some of the older episodes from years prior, and it doesn't seem to have changed very much. But like you said, they take about 36. There have been years they've taken 38. They like 36. I would say, you can only be a cheerleader for 5 years maximum with them. It's not based on your age, it's based on number of years you're
Mhm.
with them. So every year you can imagine there are 5-year veterans that are then no longer eligible to come back. Most people tend to come back, but even if they lose a few others, you're looking at probably adding 10-ish new girls to the
Hmm.
team, roughly every year. I think that can change a little bit, but yeah. So I would say about, 25, 26 women are coming back to retry out for their jobs.
Yeah, and it makes some sense for the nature of this. It's a performing arts. It's a combination of performing arts and athletics and some other things that really
Yeah.
make up the fundamental requirements of the job. So having to prove at least physically that you're still up to the challenge, right, of doing the
Mhm.
job, whether it's, and we can talk about injuries in a little bit, but
Oh my gosh,
whether
yeah.
it's injuries or you don't keep yourself in shape in the off season, that happens a lot in sports, right? Like it's a very
Mhm.
physical job and requires a lot of dedication in the off season as well, I'd imagine, to stay on top of your game. But the fact that they don't seem to really give too much benefit of the doubt to the returning cheerleaders, I thought was interesting. And I guess the last thing I'll say about the recruitment process, and it's a touch of a spoiler alert, maybe for folks who are going to start to watch this. The first couple of episodes of the 7-part documentary are really about the tryouts and then the
Mhm.
training camp and the process to whittle down some really, really big number at the beginning down to the 36 at the end. And one of the final two women who were released from the team, Trish, is
Mhm.
released for a incredibly stupid and frustrating reason. I don't know how much you remember this part of it. She's essentially released for the team because at the very last minute, the powers that be decide she's not tall enough, right?
Mhm.
That and there was no other real reason given why she was one who did not make it at the end. And they even have a conversation where one of the team owners and the woman who runs the team, whose name is Kelly, who's the director of the cheerleading organization there,
Yeah.
debate whether or not they should put a minimum height requirement in the application process, which apparently they never had. And I felt
Right.
really angry for this person at the end who was getting cut from the team simply because there was nothing she could do, right? Your height is your height. And she was in the meeting room where she was being released, begging for her spot on the team or
Mhm.
begging for another chance, really, to prove she should be on the team. And they were like, well, there's really nothing you can do without telling her, well, we decided you're too short, right? Which would have been an awful thing to say.
Well,
And I felt
it,
really bad because it gets to me of things like hiring process and job offer process when you're sort of inventing reasons not to hire somebody that were never documented or articulated, and how unfair that can be. And it really was kind of unfair.
I agree, but I also just would say that the thing about not being tall enough is your legs are often then not long enough to make it. They have to make it 10 yards in 4 steps and land right on the line every time of that next yard line. And what they were finding with her, she looked good, but she was not able to land her foot like on that 20-yard line, on that 30-yard line in 4 steps. And so when you put her in a line with all of the other girls that can, she
Mm,
always looked like a little half step off. And it ruined the formation. So I guess I do understand that they probably shouldn't have phrased it as it's a height requirement. The requirement should be you have to be able to get from the 10-yard line to the 20-yard line or so forth in 4 steps and have your toes past the
mm.
next yard line. Because that was really what it came down to with her. She couldn't do it. And she was struggling, right? She was like running to it basically to try and get her foot solidly on that next hash line. So I don't know. You know what? I did look it up because it's been a long time since I was in sort of day-to-day HR. I was thinking like, has anything changed? Um, First of all, appearance in general, because they're very much judged on their appearance throughout this entire process. I looked up what the requirements actually say on their website when you apply. It says you should look well proportioned in dance wear. So there is no height requirement per se.
Right,
There's
right. Yeah,
no weight requirement. There's actually not an age requirement as a maximum. There is as a minimum. You have to be 18 at the
sure.
time
That
you're
makes
doing
sense.
this.
Right. There's a lot
Okay.
of hours, a lot of work at night, et cetera. Right.
But right, but this has come up not just through them, but through other, other cheerleading jobs or dancer jobs. it is not a protected class. Your appearance is not a protected class unless it is something that is, an ethnicity,
Yeah.
gender, something like that, right? So these things, as horrible as it seems in this day and age, they're not protected for
Right.
these.
Sadly, a lesson I've learned multiple times in my career,
It's held you back.
it has. I, I was just not pretty enough to get some of the
Yeah,
jobs I wanted over the years. But
yeah. Can
yeah,
I
so
tell you though, I'd love to hear your reaction because I don't know if you actually did you look up all the criteria they are actually judged on during those, because we're talking about recruitment during those first few weeks,
no, I
especially.
didn't. All I really took from it is what I saw in the documentary.
Okay, I'm just gonna, for anybody who either has or hasn't watched it, just quick little bullet point list. So first and foremost is your dance technique. We saw a lot of that. They focus on that highly. High kicks. You have to be able to make the high kicks, which again, that goes back to height. If you are not able to stand arm in arm, think of like if you haven't seen the show like the Rockettes do, you have to be able to high kick to
Hmm.
where it looks uniform with the other dancers. You have to be able to land in the splits, which I would love for you to talk about in a minute because you mentioned injuries. That's going
Hmm.
to come up. Showmanship makes sense. Personal appearance. So again, it doesn't say anything specific other than you must look well proportioned in your dance wear, which leaves a lot of interpretation. Your energy, your enthusiasm, your poise. Poise I thought was interesting because you have to be able to do appearances with the public. You have to be interviewed. So I was a little bit surprised that was in there. Hadn't thought about that. Your figure, which
What
interesting
does
that they
that
call
mean?
that out separate from your physical appearance. I
The
don't know why
figure.
that's
I
a
don't.
separate thing.
That
Your
that's
figure,
okay. That feels like a relic from like the 70s.
that
Like
that
even that
feels a little,
even that
yeah.
expression. Hmm.
I would love to know why they singled that out. And your personality is the last item. Now, I don't know if those are in order of importance. I sort of think when you write things down, you tend to write them in order of importance. Yeah, so personality. But again, personality to me would be a little bit maybe showmanship. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it is a performing art as well as kind of an athletic endeavor. It's
Yeah,
kind of, it
it's
falls.
both.
And I don't want to get into a debate about what cheerleading is. Is it a sport or not a sport? I don't think it even matters, right? For the
It's athletic,
purposes of,
to
of
say
the,
the
yeah,
least.
certainly for the purposes of this
Yeah.
discussion. I do seem like, though, it has enough, the recruitment process itself is
Hmm.
similar enough to some of the difficulties people find with recruitment processes for really lots of jobs today, right? It's lots of competition, somewhat a very long list of requirements, some of which feel a little nebulous and almost arbitrary, and ultimately making decisions about who gets hired at the end, at least somewhat based on the hiring manager's gut feelings and
Yeah,
subjective
right.
evaluations of things like showmanship or, personality, right?
Yeah. In our jobs,
What does that
in
even mean,
corporate,
right? Yeah.
we sort of look at people. How do you carry yourself, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
hiring someone in a sales job, are they confident? Do they carry themselves with confidence? That might be some of that showmanship of that sort of a job. But if you're in retail, maybe you have to be friendly and outgoing and, those sorts of things. So we probably word them a little differently, but we do have many of these in really every job that we're interviewing for, similar to this. I
Mhm.
think it's just, again, when it starts getting into things that feel like very subjective around someone's weight, or their physical body appearance, if they're still able to do all the high kicks and the showmanship and the poise and all the things, it felt a little ugly to me that they were cutting some of these women.
Yeah, for sure. And again, just a reminder to folks both who are looking for work or have been looking for work, or, I heard a lot of tales lately about the job market. It's been really particularly tough.
Hmm.
In a lot of especially more in the professional roles and the technical roles, maybe less so in the other types of frontline work where there's still a lot of demand for workers. But yeah, it's sometimes it's so hard to know why you didn't get a job. Often you just never find out. But even when you're told face to face, which
Right.
these cheerleaders are getting released from the team face to face, sometimes they're not even really, it's just, oh, you're not ready yet. Maybe next year, right?
Hmm.
It's hard to even know. So that's a big.
Steve, on that though, I would love to get your opinion on one specific thing you're kind of talking about, which is So what happens is they typically would have a practice with the larger group before they've gotten to that end number of 36. And at the end of that, they might pick one or two or even three young women that they call out to come to their office afterward. So when they're getting that feedback, one thing I found a positive in that is that they're typically not cutting someone on the first try without having any kind of feedback with them. So I did respect the fact that they're calling them in and saying, look, it looks like you're doing XYZ really great. We appreciate that, but you're not able to kick high enough.
Right.
And then they're saying, we're not cutting you today, but so they're almost like planting the seed, like, unless you have by the next practice ability to do this thing, then you're cut. So
Yeah.
you sort of know, but I don't know. I don't know how that would play out in other jobs. That seems like,
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could look at it as like maybe a probationary kind of period in other jobs, or,
yeah,
like
that's true.
or a job where you're hired for 2 weeks. There's some of the service jobs are like that. I know in certain, like I've heard of bartending jobs, which are like that. You get
Oh,
hired,
okay.
but maybe you've got a week of kind of probation and you get
Yeah.
4 or 5 shifts. And at the end of those shifts, you're going to get assessed again. And maybe
Hmm.
you'll get
Okay.
offered to stay on, or you won't, right? So I do think that makes some sense. Look, I didn't have as many problems with this organization and how it's run in the selection process, which I had a couple, which I've mentioned. But my main problems with this, like I said, what drew me to even doing this in the first place was the really famous, almost notorious stories we read about the low compensation and combined with very high demands that are placed
Hmm.
on these cheerleaders, both high demands of time and high physical demands, leading to, in many cases, a lot of injuries as well.
Right. Right.
The Netflix documentary doesn't really it skirts the compensation discussion. It really doesn't focus on it. I don't recall them even talking about it. And so I did a little bit of research, and much like many other organizations, Trish, the Dallas Cowboys do not like to talk very much about this, and they try to keep this kind of under wraps. But
Hmm.
there's been a number of reports about this which suggest that the cheerleaders themselves, once they're on the team, they're compensated somewhere between $15 and $20 per hour for
Hmm.
their time they
Right.
spent working, which is essentially their practices and their rehearsals. And for games, they're paid between $400 and $500 per game. Now, it appears like they only really work the home games. So that's about 10 games, maybe 11, depending on playoffs and things like that
Right.
per season, plus
Mhm.
lots of time. It's hard to know how much exactly spent in rehearsals. They seem to rehearse almost every day. And
They
at
do.
one point, Trish, and in the documentary, towards the end of the season, when things get busy with holidays and appearances and things like that, the Cowboys famously play a Thanksgiving Day game every year, right? Where the
Sure.
cheerleaders have to work. That at one point it stated that the cheerleaders had to work 21 consecutive days. They were working, right? At
Hmm.
one point towards the end of the season. So they're putting lots of time for really kind of the same kind of pay you could get, right? Going to work as a cashier at the Home Depot, right?
Right.
Essentially, and really put two things are happening. There are a lot of pressures put on them, incredibly high performance expectations, lots of physicality, and even some injuries, right? As we see. And the documentary does a pretty good job of telling the story of one former cheerleader who had to have multiple surgeries due to injuries from her time as a cheerleader. So Trish, let's just talk a little bit about the compensation thing, because that's probably the
Yeah.
thing that people know the most in terms of the workplace connection to this story. What are your thoughts about, let's just say, for the argument's sake, that the numbers I threw out there are close enough to true, or true? What would you kind of respond to that?
Yeah, I think the numbers, similar to you, I looked them up too. I actually found a Time article. The numbers were 2022, very similar to what you said, 500 a game or so. I did read, and this was all found in Time magazine, they were talking about how they are, along with the Carolina Panthers cheerleaders, the highest paid cheerleaders in the NFL. They can make up to $75,000 a year
Hmm.
in this part-time role. So that I thought that was interesting. So we hear a lot about how much per game, but when I didn't realize they were being paid for all the practices, appearances, and other things, like I wasn't sure how that worked.
Hmm.
Now, again, if you sort of take out, say, the 10 games roughly, um, at 500 a game, you're still talking about a lot of hours they're working, even though they're part-time, to get up to
Oh,
that
yeah.
75K. That's a lot of hours if that's true. Um, I did look up just for comparison what the top 10 highest paid cheerleaders in the NBA make. I'll only give you the top two for time, but the New York Knicks cheerleaders and the Atlanta Hawks cheerleaders make about 35,000 annually for a part-time role. They're getting 650 for every game,
Nice.
but
And
also
there
when
are
you add
more
in
games.
practice.
Yeah.
So, I think for me,
Well,
it
let me
sounds
stop you there,
awful.
Trish, for a second.
Yeah,
They say there's 10, 11 games in a season for these Cowboys cheerleaders, home
yeah,
games, right?
yeah, do the math.
And but okay, so that's between $5,000 and $6,000. So
Yeah,
let's just argument's sake say they're making another $60,000 based on all
yeah,
those other hours.
right.
$60,000 at $20 an hour, the high end of the range we read. Trish,
That's a,
that's 3,000 hours, right?
yeah, that's
That's 3,000
impossible.
hours. It's not possible, right? It's not
Not
possible
possible to get
because
there.
a normal full-time job in the United States, right? 50 weeks at 40 hours a week is 2,000 hours, right? So
Right.
to work 3,000 hours at $20 an hour to make 60 grand is
Yeah,
just not possible, right? It's just not possible in a football season. You'd be working
yeah.
18-hour days every day. So something's not right. The math's not mathing, as the kids say.
That's
And,
what I thought. Okay. And
and,
I mean, we're looking at reputable sources, so that's why it's a little odd.
So the idea that they're making $75,000 a year seems
I
probably not
think it's
possible.
probably in that 30 to 35,000
Yeah.
range.
And so where I have a problem with it, Trish, is that the expectations, the demands,
Hmm.
coupled with, right, the Dallas Cowboys, Trish, franchise, okay,
Yeah, I know. I know where you're
is the
going.
first sports franchise in the whole entire world
Yeah.
to be valued, and Forbes is the company that puts out these valuations. Forbes has valued the Cowboys franchise as being worth $10 billion. $10
Yes, billion.
billion with a B. They're the highest value sports franchise in the entire world, including
Hmm.
all the soccer teams in Europe, right? All the other football teams here, basketball, you name it. So and these girls are told over and over and over again, oh, it's such a big deal, it's so important, it's so prestigious,
Hmm.
it's what an honor to
An
be here,
honor.
et
That's right.
cetera, representing this brand, don't tarnish the star, and all this nonsense
Oh, yeah.
for an organization worth $10 billion, who essentially is getting away with paying these cheerleaders as little
Mhm.
as they can get away with,
Right.
because they know there's a lot of applicants out there. And if one
Yeah.
cheerleader raised her hand to say, I don't think I'm getting compensated enough, I demand more, they would just cut her and bring in somebody else
Oh,
immediately.
absolutely. Yeah.
So,
And can I add too? I don't know if you looked this up. I looked up what is the lowest cowboy salary?
oh, it's got
Eight,
to be a couple of $1 million, right?
no, 832,500. Now
Okay.
that's to sit the bench. To sit the bench. Now you do go through practice, right? They are practicing, that's true, and traveling, but to literally sit the bench,
Yeah.
they get
I,
$800,000.
Yeah, I wouldn't make an argument that the cheerleaders deserve, pay parity with the
No,
players. I wouldn't make that argument, right? Because the players and the game are what
right.
kind of make the whole thing possible. That's why
And the
people,
physicality for the players is quite a bit more
but
intense, right? Than,
the level at which, the cheerleaders are compensated, to me, is unconscionable, especially at those very, very high ends, the most prestigious
Mhm.
team, the most prestigious cheerleading squad.
Right.
We're not making documentaries about, sadly, the New York Jets cheerleaders, right? Nobody cares about them, right? So
Right, right.
I do think that's something.
Um,
So
can I give you one other fun fact that
sure.
kind of made me mad? It might make you mad. The average, the typical, it says, this is on the Pro Football Network says this, the typical salary of the NFL water boy is 50 to 60,000 a year.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, right?
Hmm.
Ridiculous. So we could go on and on about this. I leave it at that. One of the reasons why employees go to look to union representation
This
is
is it.
exactly the thing we're talking about here,
They need
right?
it.
Because they could use representation in for so many reasons, for the workplace rules and hours, their compensation, certainly.
Right.
You know, we learn about one of the former cheerleaders who's undergone multiple surgeries. They never mention in the documentary who's actually paying for all these surgeries and all for her health care, and whether or not these women are actually covered at all by the Dallas
Yeah, I don't
Cowboys
believe
health
they
insurance
are.
plan.
If
It
they
doesn't,
are, they've not, you can't find that
it seems
anyway.
unlikely, right? So those are all the reasons why. So that would be my last thing I'll say in terms of compensation, because it's really
Yeah.
egregious, quite frankly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, for these women, whether it's a physical injury or for some it's physical and mental, like an emotional, because this is grueling. It's almost hard to watch sometimes the way that feedback is given. It's things I would never ever say in a workplace in that way, right? Even if someone isn't meeting guidelines, criteria, what have you, it's the way that the message is delivered is often cruel, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm just one person, but I read an article where they were talking about that Kelly, who is, Kelly and Kelly Finglass, the DCC director, and Judy Trammell, the DCC head choreographer. I don't know what Judy makes, but Kelly makes $1.5 million a year. She has full benefits. She has every single thing at her disposal. These young women, apparently they are allowed to go to the mental health providers there if they want to. But I was thinking, like, in these jobs, they probably can't. They probably don't feel comfortable going to sort of in your within the walls of the organization, right? It's not like they can go to a mental health professional outside to get some assistance. They're having to, it's so insular. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just
And
feel like these girls are not being really cared for at all.
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Trish, because the documentary makes a point of saying, right at the beginning, the owner of the Cowboys makes a point of saying that
Mhm.
the cheerleaders unit has become like a self-sustaining business unit, their own
Oh, it's a
little,
multi-million-dollar
yes,
business.
their own profit center, right, in the
Hmm.
team organization.
Yeah.
And if that report is correct, I saw the same report, Trish, about Kelly, who's the director's annual
Hmm.
salary estimated to be $1.5 million.
Yeah.
The pay disparity there, right? We read about this a lot in industry, right? The pay
Yeah.
disparity between CEOs and average workers is
Yes.
growing and growing and growing, that disparity. And that's a show, another show we can do all about that. But if those numbers are accurate, what we think the cheerleaders are being paid and what this
Hmm.
director is being paid, that would put this organization right at the top, right? In terms of
Yeah.
pay disparity between the leader of the organization and what the normal worker, right, earns for the organization. It's shocking,
Right.
right? The disparity. So I'm not saying Kelly should make less salary, right? I'm all for
No, not
people
at all.
getting whatever they can get in the free market. But I do feel like in some cases, and this is one of them, the free market, the free labor market is not really working, right, for these cheerleaders. So,
Yeah. No, I mean, I think as a director, it's fine that she makes that amount of money. She seems to work very hard. She and the choreographer, Judy, are there all the time with these young women. They're putting in the hours, they're away from their families. They have the pressure of bringing in this as a profit center, right? Because when both of them were DCC cheerleaders back in the early 80s.
yeah,
And it was not bringing in a profit at that point. So I think some of I'll ask it instead of saying it. We are of a certain age, right? And I fall into this a little bit sometimes. I always stop myself. But do you ever find that when you're thinking of people who are in their 20s, say, like many of these cheerleaders, you sort of feel like, well, I paid my dues. I put in my hours. I worked so much overtime. I didn't get paid enough. And it's sort of like, I wonder if part of what the mindset is at the DCC and these other cheer organizations is like, well, we had to go through this and we turned out just fine and we have lots of opportunities now. I'm not
mhm.
saying it's right. I just, do you think that's coming into play at all, or am I just misreading that, or
I I don't know if it's coming into play here.
yeah.
If I had to guess, I'd say this is more about an imbalance of power. And
Mm.
since the organization knows that through a lot of hard work and some of which was done by the director and the choreographer, certainly
Yeah.
through a lot of hard work and a lot of history, this particular organization has achieved almost a power imbalance over the people who want to work there, right? And this happens
Yes.
occasionally in industries, right? We see it like, at certain times it ebbs and flows, but I would say right now, probably a company like, Google or Apple or Nvidia may have a little bit more power, right, over
Mm-hmm.
workplaces because so many people want to come and work there. Although, Trish, even in those industries, we don't see this kind of, you know, uh, I guess because there's enough competition for talent amongst,
Right.
say, tech workers in this example, that salaries and wages just keep going up, right?
Sure.
Um, I guess right now, since the Cowboys are not the only cheerleading organization, but they've figured out how to be the one everybody who's a
Mm-hmm.
high-end performer or dancer wants to work for. I feel like they're exploiting that position, and they
Yes.
at no point in this documentary do anybody even suggest that, boy, we should treat these cheerleaders a little bit better and pay them a little bit more, right?
Right.
They would never feel like they need to, right? And
Mm-hmm.
consequently they won't. I suspect until as and when they need to, and they may never need to. But it's
Yeah.
that's the challenge there. And I think I don't want to like make this whole show about the cheerleaders don't get paid enough. They clearly don't. But one of the things you mentioned, Trish, about the directors and how hard they work, et cetera, et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk about the next kind of workplace topic in this documentary, which is work-life balance, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now both the director and the choreographer are paid pretty well. They're full-time employees.
Sure.
They do seem to be working all the time, which seems baffling to me that,
Yep.
a cheerleading director for a football team is going to be that busy year round. But at one point, the owner of the team, who's actually technically the daughter of the owner of the team, but who's
Yeah.
involved in some of the team management and decisions about the cheerleaders who are going to make the team, et cetera, she literally says that she wants Kelly, the director, she
Mm-hmm.
wants Kelly to be laying up awake at night worried about this. She just says
Yes.
it out loud, right?
Yep.
Like, so the demands from the people who own the Cowboys on these employees, not the cheerleaders now I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about, but the full-time employees, they seem incredibly high as well. Now, I'm not playing a violin for the $1.5 million director of the Cowboys cheerleaders. She's doing just fine. But the demands on their time and their attention and their dedication are quite high to the point where they seem to just have no life outside of work. And the director even says in one of her little confessionals to the camera, like, oh, her home life and her work life, it's all the same. There's no difference. I can't tell the difference anymore. And she's always working.
Mm-hmm.
And they hint at that to the detriment of even some of her personal relationships, including with her own children. So
Sure.
yeah, so there that it's that's kind of a Gen X vibe too, by the way, that just working all the time thing.
So that's what I was a little bit trying to get at. I feel like it's sort of like you feel like you have to do that. You have to pay your dues all along the way. And there is a cost to having a huge salary. There is. Even not a huge salary, just a nice hefty salary, right? Like there have been times in my career where I've been working 15, 16, 17 hours a day and not and you're having meetings in multiple time zones from like Asia Pacific to the US to Europe to you know what I mean? Like I know you've been in those jobs too, but at some point what I'm intrigued by is like Kelly, the director, has stayed in this job for like 30 some odd years. So it's a conscious choice that she's made before she even had a family.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I want to do. So I don't know. It felt a little cultish to me, I guess, is maybe what I would compare it to. Or like a sorority of sorts. Like that, it goes back to that. It's a privilege, it's a sisterhood. We all have the same purpose and passion. It's a little cultish to me. And I don't even know if she realizes sometimes that she's caught up in it
Yeah,
as well.
there's a shocking lack of perspective amongst
Yeah.
most of the people in this documentary.
Yes.
Not the cheerleaders so much, but
Yeah.
the certainly the directors, the owners of the team. Look, it's fine to be, it's fine to be engaged in your work, and we all strive for
Sure.
that, and organizations strive to have like those high levels of engagement. But Yeah, they figured out a way somehow, right, for in this organization to, yeah, push it more towards this cult-like devotion,
Mhm.
much
Mhm.
to the detriment of many of their personal lives, and certainly for the cheerleaders, to the detriment of their earning potential, and certainly their physical ramifications in terms of injuries, exhaustion, and having to maintain those performance standards as well as those appearance standards, right? I mean,
Right.
there's a scene in there where the director of the team is evaluating high definition close-up still photos of the
Mhm.
cheerleaders and telling her to change
Mhm.
the makeup application on her lower eyelid or something like
Yes.
that. It's
It's a lot.
which is crazy, but
Yeah.
somehow that's what's going on in this organization. Very strange.
It is very strange. And again, I think some of these women, they want it so badly. They're in it. Once they make it, then they want to. When you looked at the couple that were having maybe have gained a few pounds and they come back, the next year and they're being told they're overweight, basically. So it's giving, pressure that causes them to have eating disorders and just an unhealthy life. And I don't know. I know that dancers especially have to go through, dancers of all kinds have to go through very rigorous procedures to, not procedures, but just practices on their own to stay fit, right? Like any athlete. But again, I think it's a little bit on delivery, you know, to tell someone that they can't, they're weighing too much when I went and looked that up and it says you should be well proportioned, I would argue this girl was absolutely well proportioned. And my goodness, she looked great. And I don't know, I feel like in other parts of our culture, you're starting to see better representation of all body types. Again, as long as they're able to meet the dance criteria,
Mhm.
right? There are many dancers of all sizes that are very effective at what they do.
Well, I'll just say my expectation from watching this documentary is I don't think we're going to be seeing too many different body types on this
No.
cheerleading squad anytime soon.
Well,
Yeah.
no. And not only is it your makeup and your weight, it's also things like hair color. I mean, at one point, I think it was Judy said it, but anyway, when she's setting up the formations and she says she's doing it by hair color, she doesn't want two people with the same hair color, like next to each other. And so if your hair is the wrong color, they will take you. They take a lot of the girls and give them makeovers, and it's not what the girls want. They don't get any, they just have to take it. Oh, if I came to work and you said, you know what, Trish, I feel like you need to have red hair because it doesn't look right when we're on camera, I would be like, that's insane. Like, why in the world?
Yeah,
You
and
know?
that's I guess what I mean by when I say a healthy dose of perspective would benefit
Yeah.
a lot of the folks in this organization. And
Yeah.
look, they've taken sort of this striving for excellence, which is talked
Hmm.
about a lot in the documentary, how the director particularly, she's lauded for her commitment to detail and striving for excellence and not settling, always wanting the best. They certainly take it too far on, by any normal, rational person's
Yeah.
view. Like
But
you're
she was
talking,
brainwashed long ago
yeah, you're talking
herself.
about the performance of cheerleaders in a 90,000 person football
Mhm.
stadium where the vast majority of people are only going to see them on this big screen that's,
Sure.
part of the jumbotron, to talk about the lower eyelid makeup being slightly off, right, is insane and bizarre. Trish, the last thing I want to talk about, and
Yeah.
you might have others, is just a little bit about the safety here.
Yes.
And because it spins into potential harassment. Okay. And I'm not
Mhm.
talking about the safety in terms of injuries from the physical nature of the job, which is certainly an element here in the show, but
Yeah.
also towards the end of the documentary, one of the cheerleaders performing during a game is
Hmm.
inappropriately touched by a
Yes.
photographer who's
Hmm.
there working the game. She reports the incident to security, who then
Yeah.
reports it to the police. And it's a good chunk of the last kind of episode and a half, maybe, of the documentary. And it underscores to me, Trish, just something we've talked about off and on over the years, and you've talked about a
Mhm.
lot more than me, obviously, from your perspective, is women in the workplace today are have to put up with so much nonsense
Hmm.
and BS, and they're often having to just turn the other cheek. They're often not believed. They're often discouraged from reporting incidents, whether they're verbal or physical types of harassment. Um, I think when the harassment incident was reported, they sort of did mostly the right thing by her, I think. Um, and then I won't spoil with what actually happens with the incidents in the documentary, but Trish, I don't know, just from your perspective as an HR leader, but certainly as a woman too, like just
Right.
the workplace harassment element here rears its ugly head before the documentary's over.
Yeah, that was actually the probably the most upsetting thing of the entire documentary watching. Um, I understand. I've been on the HR side. You do have to investigate these things. You do have to, if you have video proof, obviously, things like that, you would want that. But in the moment, I felt like in the moment they did not comfort this young woman in the way that I would have done it if it were me, if this was someone at my company. I would have done much more, I think, to not just document, but to comfort.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that element was missing. I didn't feel like they didn't believe her, but it was a big deal to her. This was someone that really touched like all the way down her back and lower. And it's not, you know what? I'm just going to say it's not even just in the workplace. I think I read something recently where it said that if you're a female, and especially female, not that it doesn't happen to males too, but specifically if you're a female, you really just want people, friends, a partner, spouse, whatever, who will make you feel safe and protected. That is like our number one need as women is safety. And that we can't really perform effectively in any role in our life if we don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like this girl is being asked to, they did pull her eventually
Mm-hmm.
off the field, but to go back out even after that and perform um, when she doesn't feel safe. So I do think that organizations, especially when you have women in roles where they are maybe less dressed, and out there, they should have had security watching and being there so that they don't give the opportunity as easily for people to have access to these young women. We look at them and we think, yes, they are grown, but I'm sorry, my daughter is 20, almost 21. I would protect her with my life to prevent someone from touching her inappropriately. And unfortunately, nowadays, women are touched all the time, both inside the workplace and outside the workplace without our consent. And I'd say you're hard pressed to find someone who hasn't had it happen, you
Yeah,
know?
it's a sad truth, Trish, and I've heard this
Yeah.
story many, many times, both from you and others. And it's
Hmm.
do better, I guess, is all I'd say to the vast majority of people who are doing this are men, and you just do
You know
better.
what?
I mean,
Do better, but also for any person listening, I don't care if you're in HR or just any other business, whatever your role is at work, for the people that are in your line of vision, help them feel safe. I don't
yeah,
care if it's your boss, right? Make them feel safe. Make it a safe environment. And if I were to tell any organization what to focus more money on, it would be that. Making all your employees, all of them, feel like they are safe at work from being touched or have things said that are inappropriate and
it's
that are
worth
offensive.
probably, yeah, we haven't done this in a while. It's
Yeah.
probably worth digging into this topic some more, Trish, maybe
Yeah.
updating it, maybe getting someone on the podcast to talk a little bit about workplace safety and what's going on, and maybe it's just
Yeah.
some strategies to help people feel more safe at work specifically.
Well,
Um,
yeah. And also to be, then how do you report that safely?
yeah, yeah.
Because I think people struggle with the repercussions. Yeah, you might be able to go, you can go to HR and tell them, but
I think,
you
and there's a
know,
lot here too. So much like the compensation issues, the
yeah,
recruitment issues,
yeah.
kind of the performance standard issues, this
Hmm.
workplace safety issues, there's so much you could talk about in this, that's related to the world of work and the workplace from this documentary, which is why we decided to talk about it here on the show today.
Right,
And it is, it's 7 episodes long. Their episodes are probably 45 minutes to an hour a piece. So there's quite a bit of content here to watch. But
right.
um, I would recommend this just to, if you haven't really seen some of the nitty gritty of performance evaluations and recruiting processes and kind of
Mhm.
a high performance culture of a different kind and some of the ramifications and the expectations on people and what it does to people. I think it's worth I'd recommend it for that, even if you don't care about sports or care about Dallas. I don't care about Dallas, but like I found it really worthwhile to watch and interesting, and I'd recommend it. And I'm glad we were able to take some time and talk about it too today.
Me too. I would say also these young women are so entertaining. There were a lot of positives. I mean, like I kind of alluded to at the beginning, there are so many positives in the situation. And when you see the level of performance that these young women bring to the field each time they perform, when you see them out doing these different appearances, working with, different organizations of people who are in need, it's very inspiring. So I thought there was a lot of positive. It wasn't just all negative. I think you and I are probably just more attuned to some of the
Yeah.
workplace issues, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, they're
I
beautiful performers. I'm amazed they can do these dances,
yeah.
honestly. I think they said they have to know roughly 300 dances, and some are longer, like Thunderstruck that they're known for is a longer full-length song. But yeah, at any moment they hear those first few bars of a song, they have to know it's like 300 different routines.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're brilliant women.
No, they do a ton of work and they're not paid enough for it, as I said, but
Yeah.
really fascinating. Good, couple of good celebrity cameos in the documentary, a Dolly Parton cameo, as
Sure.
well as Emmett
Yeah.
Smith cameo. Maybe there's at least one other I'm forgetting, but
Yeah.
check it out. It's America's Sweethearts, the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders. It's on Netflix, 7 episodes. Yeah, if you don't have Netflix, call up your cousin, get there, log in. I'm sure they have it and check it out. So Trish, good stuff. Great to chat about this. I love doing these shows where
I
you and
do
I get
too.
to chat for a while and we don't have to like worry about taking care of some guest's massive ego, quite frankly. So
Just your ego.
just my just my massive ego. So
No, you know what? I think these are fun too because it does put us back with our HR hats on, and we have
yeah,
to really, really pay attention and look for issues. And for me, I don't know about for you, I think it's for you too. It puts me in the seat of like, okay, how would I handle this?
mhm,
Would I handle it similar, different? How would it be
yeah.
different? It's good practice, I think. If you're new to HR and you're listening to this, watch the show with that hat on, right? Think about how would you handle this if you were the CHRO or the VP of HR, right? With some of these
It's
issues that
weird. We
pop up.
spent 7 hours in this workplace and not once
Yeah.
is anybody from HR even mentioned. We don't see anybody from
No,
HR. They don't talk about anybody from HR. Never comes up once,
no,
interesting enough.
I'll tell you what, it's so like I said, the show itself, it was called something different when it was on a different network. And that's it's a 24/7 shown on Pluto TV and I think like Samsung Plus where you can just watch it for free. Um, yeah, these girls don't really appear to be seeking for help. One thing I will say, I wish that the Netflix documentary would have given a little bit of content on some of the darker issues. And they really, I felt like glossed over it and overall made it look very positive.
Mm.
So to me, a documentary should dive into some of the ugliness as well.
It is largely positive and
Yeah,
mostly
that
paints
was
the
disappointing.
Cowboys in a positive light, mostly, not completely. Well, we'll leave folks to watch this and decide
Yeah,
for
watch
themselves.
it and see what you think. Please tell
Yeah.
us.
Great stuff. Okay, so reminder, check out the show we did with Shoulder. Check out the Volunteers America Colorado show.
Right.
Of course, hope you're enjoying this show. Thanks to our friends at Paychex, of course, for all their support. Check out all the show archives at hrhappyhour.net. And for Trish Steed, my name's Steve Bose. We will see you next time, and bye for now.